how early is too early to engage with I guess this is kind of an innovative perspective with a design or manufacturing consultancy. And I guess by extension of that question, how early is too early, but also what would you guys, looking at the consultancies, sort of require almost as a bare minimum to even get that conversation kind of moving, I suppose. So it's a general question, it wasn't aimed at anyone, so it's open to anybody who wants to answer. If nobody puts a hand up, I'll point at you and make people answer. But yeah, so it's open. So who wants to take that first?
Okay. Yeah, if I can. It will depend on the design consultancy that you talk to as to when it might be too early, but the bare minimum that we'll need is your draft marketing requirements. So that's what kind of market are you going after, how big is it, so therefore what kind of volumes are you looking at, what features might they want to have in it. We can flesh that out with them to develop the technical requirements, but having a grasp of your marketing requirements is probably the bare minimum that we'd expect to start the conversation with us. There's no commitment to having a conversation with us at all, and probably similar to manufacturers and other design consultancies. You don't hand over money, you don't hand over your intellectual property when you have a chat with us. We can give you some valuable insight, and we don't mind if you don't come back for another 12 months, 2 years. Hopefully it's not that long, but sometimes it really is.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the panel? Oh, yeah.
I would say that from my perspective, our collaborative networks will pull in design consultancies at a point when someone's got a concept, so it's never too early. At that point we'll do a business opportunity analysis, we'll look at the markets we're looking to penetrate, we'll do some form of assessment of the design at that early stage of the concept, and we'll give some early feedback. But the earlier you engage with a design consultancy and a manufacturing consultancy, you'll get a no-go, go or no-go feedback from that. So the earlier, the better.
Yeah, it's quite an important pre-filtering process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever too early. Like, advice I normally give to students that are wanting to follow a similar path is go out and get involved in every possible networking event that you can find. So the Scottish Institute for Enterprise, a popular one with students. I just say go along to them. It's never too early to have a conversation with someone. And the best business relationships I've had have just been built out of networking and building a mutual relationship with that person from the get-go, basically. So I don't think it's ever too early to get involved with design consultancies, manufacturers, banks, finance, whatever it is. Just go out and speak to people and build relationships.
And I fully support you. Attend networking events.
Yeah.
Very valuable.
While we still can.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. It's never too early to start having those conversations, but I think sometimes it is too early to start the design work in anger. So it's worth having the discussions, but sometimes it's worth taking a bit more time to make sure that you're designing the right product and that you've got the specification written down in a way that the team that's involved in the design can all understand what you're aiming for. Because that is a risk that you can go off and design something in the mechanical side and something in the electronic side, and if both those groups don't have the same vision for what they're aiming for, then they might not line up. So writing down your specification, I often think, is the most important and one of the hardest things to do, is to write down in detail what you're actually trying to get to.
Sorry, can I just challenge that? You said the requirement, write down your specification. Is it not more important to write down your requirements? I had an instance where someone came to us with a spec and it was physically impossible, and you would have just said, go away.
So when I talk about specification, I mean a requirement specification, not a specification in the sense of the specification of what's to be manufactured. So maybe a little bit of terminology.
So what's the need you're trying to satisfy, not how many, what's the size of the widget or how fast does it go or whatever. It's what are you trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you can't always write all that down in advance, but starting and trying to write it down often helps to identify the questions that you still need to answer.
John,
I would concur with everything you said. happy to talk to people early on. I think the ones that are slightly frustrating where it's just something on CAD with no thought about who they're going to sell it to, and the market, and it just, I'm happy to have the conversation, and you'll end up walking out of my office with some really challenging questions around those things. So we're happy to coach there, but it'd just be nice to have a little bit more thought sometimes.
Does anyone from the floor have any comments or supplementary questions?
It's around the requirements generally, but it's something Tom touched on briefly just there, but I didn't hear earlier on. As increasingly we're seeing legislation coming out to make the manufacturers responsible for end-of-life disposal costs. We're beyond that, we're huge environmental activists, like most people know that way before they even know they were a manufacturer. Where lies the responsibility to encourage people to design, to at least be able to deconstruct economically, if not even to be able to remanufacture at the end of life?
Yes, be more manufacturers maybe, I don't know. Who wants to do that, John?
I think from early doors when people get into that design verification loop, at that specific time, designers should be thinking about the recyclability of the product and how they can take next generation product and perhaps use the product reinvented but using the same plastic enclosure per se. And I just think the consciousness of people in is becoming more prevalent. More people I've engaged with in the design loop seem to be thinking about the circular economy and how do we prevent all the environmental catastrophes by sticking plastics in the sea per se. So I think for a manufacturer at that early business opportunity analysis perspective is to actually sit down with the designer and say, have you considered, because sometimes it's the last thing you do consider.
I've got maybe an additional comment to that. So I think you're right that what happens after the product's finished and how you discard it is part of the life cycle cost of the product, and that should go right into the very beginning of the product design. You're talking about requirements and specifications. I mean, in some other design, so medical device design, we talk about user needs. And the user needs is really what is a product going to be used for, and it's a lot more fuzzy than maybe what specific requirements say that you can verify. So you can validate a user need and do a clinical validation, whereas maybe so people should think about those user needs before they then create specifications and requirements. Might be a way to just in terms of terminology and language to think about before you drive straight into making some assumptions in your business case. And as you were saying, Vicky, about where your dad, how you would use it and how it would slide across the floor and things like that. They're all really important that then fed into the design of the product, and that's what people need to remember.
I have an example just to that point where they went too far, where the product actually went to tooling, unfortunately again, before taking prototypes out into, which was a clinical setting, so it was a medical product, very expensive tooling to produce the parts they wanted and using biocompatible materials, but it was a single-use applicator product, which had to be discarded every time, so every treatment they were just throwing away a plastic part. The feedback from the dentists in this application was that we can't deal with all this waste. I mean, there was a situation in Scotland where they were just refusing, the system broke down basically, and so those bags of waste were building up. So they came to us to redesign it so it could be autoclaved. That could have been put into the requirements earlier if they had a wider conversation with their actual end users, and save the tooling costs, save the design rework. And we did actually have a university student who's doing a PhD just on this question which you asked, which is whose responsibility is it in the design process to make this a requirement? Is it the manufacturer, inventor of the product, the product owner? Is it the designer who should come up with this as an idea? Is it legislative? Where's the imperative at the moment sitting? And at the moment, all we're seeing is the younger generations, the startups, are making this more of an imperative with us than the established manufacturers.
Okay, so we'll go to the top of the list then. Graham from the FRC, our friends at the FRC. We're bringing a product to market. What general advice could you give help manage expectations regards timelines, I guess, to fully design and launch as an easy one? Anybody want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, happy to. I think you said it took twice as long as expectations.
Yeah.
That's probably
Twice as
fairly
much.
realistic. We've got one thing to market in 6 months, but that was super time critical. You're probably into years in reality, particularly the more complex the product gets. But the thing that can accelerate it is focusing on the minimum viable product. It's something that we, when we're in design stage with people, is just saying, what's the thing you're going to get to market that's going to prove to your investors that you have a viable technology? And when you were here this as well, we had a conversation last night that these things just grow into having, you know, it's got to make the tea and the toast as well. It's just, I literally had that once. There's a robot that's supposed to do some extra stuff. So MVP makes it faster. You'll probably go through 2 stages, a kind of prototype 2 stage, which is the launch product to justify to your investors the actually getting to manufacturing, and then the first stage of the product goes to manufacturing.
What I kind of do now is, like, if I've got like a product development feature that I want to introduce to the product, I basically get a big bit of flip chart or a big like whiteboard, and I literally just start with my end goal and like what date that I want to achieve that, and then you just have to literally break it down to every single individual possible step. And then once you do that, you like look at the overview and you're like, okay, well, where could there be potential bottlenecks? Because it's the bottlenecks that are the thing that like ended up holding me up. You think about, you have to be really pessimistic as well and think, where could things go wrong? And I've found that to be like quite useful in like kind of gauging a more realistic time frame of how long things are actually going to take.
Can I just endorse that as well? We get a lot of startups that come to us going, I've got one, can I have 100 next month? But you know, but your supply chain's 16 weeks long, and we've got at least 2 months to get it. And so please work back through this project plan from where you want it, with all those things built in, and that becomes, and then you go, oh, I've got to finish design by next week. Oops.
Yeah.
So I mean, exploring this question a little bit further then, in your experience, where are those kind of, maybe crunch points isn't the right word, but where does it tend to really fly off course in terms of timelines? What are those critical points in the process, do you think, where you start to really see that deviation beginning to come in that people should perhaps focus on more when they're constructing that flip chart, for example?
For me, it's been probably challenges around funding's been one. Just because a lot of the funding, the way it works is like you have to pay out the cash and then you can claim it back, which is great, but there's obviously lead times in there. So like you pay out all this cash and then the person you're getting the funding from, you maybe have to wait like 60 days once you actually submit the application. So things like that, they're things you don't really think are going to like alter your overall like product development process, but they can have like a significant effect. Other things that I've experienced, just sometimes things out with your control, like suppliers basically, suppliers having supply chain issues that you just can't predict for.
Supply chains along, particularly if you've got a new product which is being built in low volumes. You can't go to your supplier and just say, can I have some next week, because they've got some tooling they've got to fit you into their run. And as a small volume customer, you're probably not that popular either. They're not going to stop their big lines for you, so you've got to fit in when they've got a gap. So just your project plan, absolutely.
Like totally fitting in with their schedule. Like you might think, all right, okay, I'll order that component in 4 weeks time and I'll get it within 2 weeks, but like that might not fit in with your manufacturer's current schedule. So
I think at that early stage when you're doing your planning and you've got your concept, I think you need to really focus on the manufacturer who's going to give you agility and move around their schedule. So the early stage you've created a common goal, and if the manufacturer's investing time and money, which they usually are, and there's remits to get you not just time to market but time to profit, then be quite astute and selective on the manufacturing partner you want to, and have that right up front so you can go and share what your goals and aspirations are for your business. And there will be stuff that will come left wing, like lead times and coronavirus and everything else, but if you've got someone who's committed to your goals and wants to commit to the agility of manufacturing, you'll find the journey a lot easier.
Welcome back to the panel.
This harks back to what Stuart said in the previous question. The one thing that I would say, anything that we do as a design house that screws things up is people changing their requirements continuously. Requirements flux and trying to control that. some customers are great at it and they understand, like if they completely rip up their original drawing and want to start again, that there's a cost and time impact to that. Some customers don't understand that. And it's like you can magically still have the same end date even though they've completely changed the whole requirement. And I think that's one of the most difficult things to actually manage out of all of these things.
Yeah.
Supply chain and that you can normally say, well, it's going to be an extra 2 to 3 weeks, it's tangible. But when you're in the design space and somebody says, actually I don't want this, I want that, and they fundamental requirements, what they want the thing to do changes, and they might not even be possible, as you said, or realistic, or within the cost that they had originally allocated. So I think that is by far outstrips all the other factors.
And they still want it in the same time.
Yeah.
It's the cost.
So top tips for managing that?
I suppose the honesty, but also like setting the expectations in the beginning before you start the job. And having that quite tightly controlled through like change management process. It's a difficult thing to do properly.
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing for designers to do in the moment as well. So if you set a designer onto a task and then the customer deals directly with that designer and there's no oversight from a project manager or a lead designer, it's not being documented that there's been a change, and therefore it's a surprise all of a sudden when there's a big delay. So we use a project management system where the designers don't have to both manage the budget and time and requirements. It's actually someone else's responsibility to drive that and keep in contact with the supply chain and also with the customer.
But again, there's a cost to that.
There is a cost, but it saves you cost and time. But you do have to justify
Sure, and
it.
then we'll come back to it, yeah?
Sure. Yeah, I think sort of going back to where we started on the question about what are the things to think about in terms of overall timescales and planning for that. It is important to think about, are you doing something that's completely new and novel? Because if you're doing something which is well understood, it is still probably going to take you longer than you think. But if it's completely novel, then it's much more likely that you're going to discover something along the way, which means that the product you thought you were planning to design is actually not quite the one that you need for the market. And it's important to give yourself the opportunity to be able to change direction and factor that in, because otherwise you end up in a situation where you're so committed to the initial design that you end up doing things that you will regret later, like ordering tooling for the wrong product, and then not having any money to get the product out there that you want.
I've got two questions about setting expectations on timescales. So I think I was writing down when you did your presentation, your timescales. So I got 18 months to the prototype ended from October 13 to April 15, and 11 months after that to the manufacturing lot.
Yep.
So it was 29 months.
Yep.
And you said you were expected to be there, so it was actually 3 times what
Yep.
more or less.
Fair enough.
Or 2.5 at least. And what I was going to say is, what do you think is good? To the questions in the design houses agency, what's typical for a project? I would say, being an electronics guy, so I'm going to put myself in a bit of a position here. I would say there's probably not a lot of components in your product, so therefore it's relatively simple in technical product. Yet it took 29 months, and almost every client I ever speak to has a much more complex product than that and expects to do it in 12 months.
So there's a couple of reasons for that. So what you sometimes find, what you often find with some startups is they've got multiple people. I was doing it just on my own, so that was one factor as to why it took me longer. Another factor was in terms of funding. I didn't have any angel investment funding at the start. It was those 2 competitions and then self-funding. So there were instances when I did just totally run out of cash, and I had a couple of months of just panicking, being like, I have no cash. So all that adds up as well. I've got loads of friends that have gone down different routes, and you can start businesses and take products to market in so many different ways. Some of the ones that have gone down angel investment routes have maybe been a bit better at managing that cash flow and understanding when they're going to run out of money and making sure they've got more investors ready to come in. But for me personally, that wasn't what I wanted. I was kind of on a journey on my own, and I wanted it that way. So it did take me longer than what it potentially takes some people. So those are 2 kind of factors, I guess.
So of your friends then, who's best in class? What's the shortest
I really don't know, to be honest, because every product's so different. It depends on the individual product. There's no right or wrong answer to that, I don't think. Every product's different.
Any more comments from the floor before we go back to the slide?
Just to pick up on your point, thinking about the fundraising, that really affects a project in terms of timelines.
Yeah.
We've seen projects that have taken 7 to 8 years, and 4 of those have been raising money. So,
Yeah.
That's just something you need to factor in, because the actual product design journey can be quite well regimented and can be, in some ways, managed quite well. But I think if you're continuously having to raise money on at certain points in the journey, it can seriously stretch.
That's interesting, because it's just dropped off that kind of top 3 list, but that was a question which I guess is quite relevant to now, which was, what advice do you have for early stage innovators with respect to funding? So I guess that can mean obviously finding that funding, but I guess there's a kind of management issue there as well. So I'm going to come to you first on that. I mean, you kind of covered it there, but
It depends on what you want to get out of the business, and it comes back to that issue of like, why are you doing it in the first place? So I think it's about understanding why you want to start a business. If you're more driven by like just getting a product out there, making cash, selling it on to someone else, on to the next thing, then you might be more inclined to look at like angel investment and maybe bringing in a broader team from the starting point. For me, it was different in that like I just wanted to go on a kind of like self journey of like learning about the process of actually taking a product to market, doing something that my dad could use, doing something that other people could use, and I just wanted to have fun with it basically. So I think in terms of the funding, you have to understand why you're doing it, because there's lots of different options out there, and go and speak to them all. So I did, like at the start, I went and spoke to angel syndicates, and I just realised at the start that they weren't really for me at that point in time. But go out, speak to Scottish Enterprise, speak to all the different angel syndicates that exist, speak to the banks as well, Scottish Edge, and then just figure out which ones are right for you and figure out why you're wanting to start a business, just to take a product to market and match it up basically once you've spoken to people.
it's such a critical issue always, so any advice on this I think would be?
Yeah, probably about 70% of our clients are funded through a combination of Scottish Enterprise support, which is matched with VC and angels. And the ones that I see that are really successful are the ones that start fundraising as soon as they get their first funding. So they're just on this continual loop. They don't just wait and spend the money and then go seeking for money. They're just continually, at least one or half of a person is actually just constantly on it when it comes to fundraising. But yeah, in the early stages, a lot of people are very reluctant to let go of any of their intellectual property, any of their equity. So there are great things in Scotland, and constantly I'm being told that there's not such a similar ecosystem down in England for things like Scottish Edge, but also Converge Challenge, particularly for a few of the academics here that can get access to that. So yeah, there's a treasure trove of early opportunities for funding as well.
We can help people find funding, so sometimes there's opportunities that are really sector specific, like accelerator programs that are really sector specific that we can help people signpost people to. I think there is lots of funding available, lots of opportunities for startup firms to get funding. I guess it's maybe a little bit controversial. I guess sometimes we see lots of people are given funding really early on, and it gives them lots of confidence in an idea that's maybe not that solid, and that can be quite a dangerous thing.
So just sort of following on from that, I'd be interested in people's views about design reviews and stage gates in the product development, and we've heard a fairly organic view of it, but particularly with getting investment and making big commitments to hard tooling, for example, what's your experiences been, and what would you recommend in terms of stage gates or design reviews, phase reviews?
Yeah, for I4 we have internal reviews, so we'll have independent reviews from someone who's not on the project before any pack goes out to a manufacturer. We'll also have, depending on the project, we'll have either weekly or fortnightly meetups with the customer where they're seeing presentations to do their own review of it, whether they're giving a technical review or just being updated on it. But we make sure that if anything goes out, it's being checked and then checked again with the manufacturers. And we do like to end our phases at that sort of finite deliverable where there is a data pack that goes out to a company. So we've received the quote back based on a data pack, but we don't progress to tooling straight away. There could be a pause whilst funding comes through.
Yeah, so from like a client perspective, I've having worked with a design consultancy, I really like the fact that like you break it down into the stages and then at the end of every stage you do the review, because the way that I worked when I'd worked with I4 was I kind of got this overarching plan of here's what we're going to go through from A to Z, but we're going to like review it at the end of each phase, and then that gives you like the opportunity when things do crop up that you maybe weren't expecting, you can maybe say, well actually can we do a little bit extra work here just to bring that up to like the level that the customers are expecting, or if you get like a piece of feedback from a customer that maybe changes your like product development plan. I found the feedback reviews to be really, really good.
I wanted to go back to that point about investment, and I think there are some companies and some investors, when you get angel investors, that just really wanting to take a sort of financial stake in the company, but then there are other people with experience and networks who actually maybe want to get involved in the board, like maybe a chairman or a CEO, and I've seen other investment companies that maybe go into early stage companies and actually want to, actually divulge and to share their experience and get, so that there's a real good symbiosis there, a new company with people who maybe don't have the experience, but maybe someone coming in at a board level who, just wants to see the goodness of their company growing. So I've seen that happen too.
But yes.
I think something that actually brings together the investment and the stage gate question is that it's important that all the aspects of the product development move forward at roughly the same speed, and the stage gates are obviously one way of making sure that the sort of the marketing and the industrial design and the engineering are all progressing at roughly the same speed. And often once you get quite far into the design, then it's fairly obvious where you should have staged reviews, but the review that quite often doesn't happen is at the early stage or the feasibility stage to say, do you understand the commercial proposition and the technical proposition, and have we checked that we can make it for the price that both of those things demand. And often obviously when you've got an early company that doesn't have a structure, doesn't have any kind of process set up for doing that part gets missed. And sometimes it's the investors that make you ask that question, and they're the ones that are saying, have you considered all these things and can you prove it to us?
Any further comments on before we move on to the next question? Okay, well, we'll go back to the top. So the next question is to John. We do have two of them, but thankfully I think it's relevant to both, so this works quite well. As a manufacturer, what do you see as key to getting new designs smoothly into manufacture, and what are the common mistakes? So either John.
Yeah, I'll take the start with. Nirvana is you have a 100% accurate bill of materials. You have some perfect standard operating procedures and a wonderful supply chain. In reality, that's probably not going to be the case. The closer we can get to that, the better. And share that data with us early, again, so for us to take a critical look at that. Again, collaboration, so we exclusively our customers will come and be part of our manufacturing team. They'll be there with us working on things together. They'll typically have an office within our office, and they'll have people up there regularly. So the point there is it's not right, there you are, there's it, crack on with it now. It's a collaborative process. If you do that, we've got a better chance of getting there faster and more smoothly than if you just hand it across. If you were to go to one of the larger contract manufacturers, that is the experience. It's like, give us the stuff, we can make it or we can't make it, and that becomes your problem, whereas I think a collaborative approach is the best approach to it.
Yeah, I would reiterate that collaboration, early supplier engagement.
Yeah.
If you're partnering with an electronics manufacturing service provider, they should be pushing in certain areas. Design for BOM cost, we call it a design for excellence model. lots of designers are catalogue designers, no disrespect to designers, and they will pick components out of RS for now in the electronics world, and 6 months later those parts are not available, and they went end of life, and then you've got another respin of the design, which elongates the time to market, which affects the time to profit. It means that people don't have cash around them. So earlier you collaborate and you're open, and you're fully engaged, and you see your manufacturing partner as being an integral part of the development of your business, and you create that win-win. It's much more palatable for EMS providers, because the sector has to put a lot of money up front to get your product to market, in terms of setting up supply chains, buying components, stocking components, working within lead times. So the earlier you can get that up front, and everybody understands the level playing field, and you're collaborating in an open way, then I think you stand a better chance of success. And you also stand a better chance, as Derek was alluding to, about the longevity or gestation period before you get that product, of actually reducing that, because EMS providers should be working towards reducing lead times on your supply.
So there's 2 further points that just occurred to me. Buying too much inventory up front, because there may well be design changes during the early phases, and you end up with a lot of excess inventory which becomes scrap, is an issue, and then multiple design set changes. So if you can have it smoothly into production, it has to be as close to the final article as possible, otherwise you're going to keep going around that loop. Yeah, those two things just occurred to me when you were speaking.
There's a couple of things to that. It's quite often my experience that when working with people who do boards, for example, you've got to understand what machines they have and what the capability of the machines are, firstly. And even, I suppose that applies to all these processes like casting and injection molding, because not everybody's got the same facilities. I think secondly, certainly in the electronics and software world, when you've done the design of the actual boards, you've also got this additional phase of saying, we've got to design test equipment to test the boards, and that test equipment is often as complex as the board itself. So you can't assume that you can just make a board up. And this is the problem, a lot of people do assume this because they have no experience of taking a thing into manufacture, that your ATE consoles might cost quite a lot of money, and that's a bit like your tooling of injection molding in the electronics world. It takes a lot of money to make the ATE test consoles, write the software for them, link it into a back office system, record your statistical process control, all that, because if you get into large volumes you need these things, and that's a whole other bit of investment over and above the actual design of the equipment itself.
I think that's a fair point Matthew raises, is the fact that my experience of what I would call developmental companies is, once they've got the product and the designer looks at the product, has got something physical, it's how do we test it, how do we package it, can we get returnable packaging, that whole journey from product realisation. The last thing that most people are thinking about is, how do I test that product? And in our industry today we're seeing lots and lots of smaller components, less and less areas in real estate to enable you to test product, and you went down one option then. I've seen 19-inch rack systems for telecoms where, you know, the boards, the printed circuit boards are the size of this, and they've got a few components in the corner, and the components are like minuscule, where they could be building bigger components using different ways of test methodologies, but at the moment they've gone down a flying probe type technology, and I think that early stage collaboration and consideration of the design, if that's done up front, it's more cost effective. And then we get to the question, okay, you've done an in-circuit test, but how do you functionally test it? How can you ensure that that product's highly reliable when it gets in the field? The only way you can do that is to test it. So you know, that whole kind of product realisation thought process has to be done up front. Otherwise, you're going to elongate that process and get your product to market.
I know that collaboration is absolutely critical, because particularly if I'm a micro company innovator, then it's probably highly unlikely that somebody's not going to necessarily know the capabilities of an injecting molding, asset or whatever it might be. And I guess that's where that early discussion helps to formulate that.
And I think the other thing there is to understand the design tools that the designers are using. I think there's a variety of design tools. Pigmented graphics, for instance, is a ODV++ format, so you get bi-directional interface to manufacturing. So it allows the manufacturer then to see how this thing hangs together in more detail. A lot of companies are now using that type of technology, or use Allegro or some other type of layout, which kind of sometimes doesn't lend itself to good design for manufacture.
Yeah. Talk to each other, that seems to be the main drive of this. Does anyone have any particular follow-up questions to either John on that topic before we move on? Any chance? No, okie doke. So, where are we? Do we have still any top few that we haven't covered? Yes, we do. From Ben. How can we create better joining up? This is coming from an innovator of the different stakeholders involved in taking innovation to manufacturing fruition. Well, I'm going to immediately answer that and say Product Design Scotland and KTN would be more than happy to help you in that regard. That's what we're here for. But I would also be interested to hear on general thoughts the panel might have on how we do that, how we bring these people together.
It's all about networking again. Yeah, it's all about networking. Get involved in every network that's out there and go along to as many of the events as you can. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's be brave. Just come and talk to us. Don't be afraid of putting a call in and come in the car and just spending an hour. We're happy to do that.
So it was me that asked the question. Can I elaborate maybe a touch on this? KTN, I mean, we've got a vested interest in this. I think our role can be to bring together the disparate expertise that is out there. What we've heard today is, a great spectrum of expertise, in multiple areas that are involved in taking any product to manufacture. There's a sense that sometimes, perhaps one stakeholder will want to hold on to the project maybe longer than they might do. How will the innovator know, when they should be engaging the next stage of the process, for instance? How will they know where to go? Who is the best stakeholder to be tackling that particular next challenge that they're facing as they take the product to manufacture? Is it more events like this?
Yeah, so I think on a wider scale, there's a lot of different support organisations out there. There's like loads and loads, and I think like more collaboration between those in a way. Like don't try and compete against each other. Like there's so many, like Prince's Trust, Scottish Institute for Enterprise, Scottish Enterprise. Don't try and like compete for the entrepreneurs. Like work more collaboratively. So more like communication between all those different agencies, I think, so that you can kind of signpost people. Like if somebody comes to SIE and SIE feel like, okay, you're maybe kind of beyond the stage that we could help you with, here's who you should go to. So yeah, I don't know, it's maybe more like collaboration across all the different support agencies and more opportunities for them to get in the same room together, I guess.
So I'm not looking at Facebook, I'm genuinely looking at questions. Okay, so this is aimed at innovators in general, so I'm going to start with you, Vicky, on this one. I'll maybe put it out to the floor, and I'll put some other innovators in the room. What are the practical challenges you've experienced in bringing concepts to market? Have there been any surprises? I'm going to suggest yes, but surely there must have been. I'll start with you, Vicky.
A couple of things then, I guess. So funding, general manufacturing stroke design challenges, so things that we just didn't really expect to happen that did then happen when it actually went to manufacture, and also team building as well. So finding the right people to build a team with, that's been quite challenging as well. I think from a startup perspective, a lot of people are drawn to really well-paid corporate jobs, and the reality of a startup is sometimes that you're not going to get as much money, but you can maybe have quite an interesting, fun experience. So you are competing against, like, especially from a graduate perspective, you're competing against companies that are offering salaries that you just cannot match. So it can be quite difficult to build a team and find the right people. Yeah, that's probably my insights into it.
So the innovators in the room, of which there's 38%, any further comments or any specific examples you could give of that they're willing to share? Of course, I appreciate you might not want to, but if there was anything you'd like to share with the team, think of it as group therapy. No? Fair enough, not push it, that could be your secret.
I think from what we see is having an agreed common purpose and an agreed roadmap of where the product is going to actually go to. We often see sort of conflict between the various members of the team, and to your point, it's the why am I doing this and what am I trying to do? It's like running any company. It's having a clear vision, mission, and the things you'd expect from a grown-up company.
I think that's really important as well when it comes to actually building the team. If you're the founder and you're bringing other people into your team, you have to make sure that they understand that you're a startup and understand that things aren't going to go the way you expect them to. There's going to be challenges. It's going to be different from what you might read on paper at that moment in time. So it's making sure that when you're building a team, that the people that you bring in have that understanding from the start.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll maybe go through another couple of questions before then. That's another one to the two Johns, who are quite a little band, it's great. How do you manage the risk and cost of working with companies at an early stage?
When we're talking before they spend money with us?
Well,
that's not risk. From a risk perspective, we're happy to cooperate with people and offer a degree of free advice on the way through. We're working on a particular project at the moment where they've got two problems that we worked out we were probably better at solving than they were, so we've done that work for nothing because that's something we just felt we'd like to do because we believe in the business plan. There does come a point where you're going to have to spend some money, which is why we invented the batch build process rather than the full pilot build process to keep those costs down. But at some point when you want to make something, you've got to buy the material and pay for production. But there is, I think, a degree of responsibility that we have to take. If we don't believe in the product and the business plan, that we won't actually take on that work and say that's not for us. If somebody else is going to do it, fine, but it's just morally wrong. And in the past, we've probably done some of those things which weren't going anywhere, and it's been a shame for everybody involved that clarity of purpose and the plan wasn't there. And we all waste our time, and that's just a disappointing experience, so we don't do it anymore.
I think, again, to just underpin what John said, is you've got a duty of care for those companies that are coming to your door, and you shouldn't really be setting false expectations with them. If you don't believe that there's a common purpose between your organisation and the innovator, then you shouldn't just go there. For Dynamic EMS, when we engage with innovative companies, and we're at that front end stage where we're saying, okay, we're going to do prototyping, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, then the way we normally deal with it is we believe in a 50-50 agreement. So the innovator will purchase the materials and we'll put the labour around it, and as we go along that journey, then we go to a full turnkey type business. But I think up front, if the innovator gets the warm fuzzy feeling that, hey, you're actually investing some money in here, then it bodes well to build that firm, trusting relationship moving forward. So we do take a shared risk, and it's only companies we believe in that will come into our portfolio of clients.
And that can come across as slightly arrogant, but I think, I don't know what your experience is, but as a management team, and I've worked with venture capitalists twice in my career and been through the pain of working with them and had to write those business plans. So this is based around some fairly heavyweight business experience we have about looking at business plans and what's realistic and the sales and marketing plan for the product. And I don't wish to be arrogant, but we've run a number of good businesses now, so I think we have some experience to bring to that party.
Any comments from the floor on that before we go to our final question of the day? Okay, so I guess the final question of the day, I'm going to aim this, I guess primarily maybe most to Tristan and Stuart here. Some of this has been covered, but I guess it's always worth just reflecting again. How do you make decisions about who you work with? I'm assuming that you have more work than you can deal with, so how do you filter that down and make that call?
I would challenge that even. Sometimes if we don't have that much work on, but there is a clash of personalities or purpose, this has been highlighted twice, it could be more damaging for us.
Yeah.
So it comes down to the expectations. If they're not willing to take on advice on how much it will cost, how long it will take, who they need to surround themselves with for advice beyond the design, if they're not willing to take on that advice, then there's going to be a bad outcome, and that will reflect badly on us. So it's like a credit rating. You don't want to go that way, because then no one will touch you thereafter. So we do say no because of personalities and purpose being misaligned.
Yeah, we touched on that point last night over dinner, didn't we? That there's organisations that were open to taking feedback and listening to it, and they don't necessarily have to take the advice, but we're open to that open discussion about where they should go, were the ones that tended to succeed, rather than the ones that were just, and we've seen this as well, they don't listen to some very obvious advice, and they say, yeah, that's fine.
Stuart, final comment to you before we...
Very, very similar. I quite often feel when I have an initial conversation with somebody who's got an idea that I'm a bringer of bad news, that it's going to take longer and that there's things they haven't thought about yet, and it's a lot to do with what is the response to that. Is it, well, let's find a way around that, or is it, no, I know exactly what I'm doing? Because I think if you start this kind of journey feeling like you know exactly how it's going to go, you might as well go and play poker. You know, I think you've got better odds just gambling the money than setting off on a product development journey.
Well, I'm going to call it there. I'm aware that there are a couple of questions on the list that we haven't got to. What we'll try and do is ensure that we do get an answer to you one way or another. Some of them are a bit more specific. So we'll get in touch with the panel after this, and we'll kind of correlate some answers to that and put it out as part of the package that goes out beyond this. So I hope that you found today useful, both in terms of the presentations and the Q&A session that we've run this afternoon, that you've managed to take away at least one little nugget of information that might help you going forward. I appreciate, I think particularly maybe as an innovator, an early stage innovator, a lot of what you might have heard here is, oh, you need this, you need that, you need the next thing, you need the next thing, and it might almost be a little bit overwhelming. But I think what also came through there is that there is the support networks there. The guys around the table here and others in this room are happy to have that conversation. So I guess maybe that's the key take home, is make sure that you're having it, because it might save you a hell of a lot of grief in the longer term to do that. So yes, network, chat, I think is definitely positive. I'd just like to thank all the members of our panel, so if you could please join me in doing so just now.